Some years back, the authorities that organise religious teaching in this country had to decide what were the religions that you could teach. It seems a very easy thing to decide upon, maybe. I think, well, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, Hinduism, and so on. They said, well, we're not sure about Buddhism because we don't actually think it's a religion. So why should it be taught in schools? And their view seemed to be that Buddhism didn't teach the existence of a creator God, and any kind of personal saviour. They say, well, these are the kind of hallmarks of genuine world religions, you might say. In one way or another, certainly the creator God bit. And you don't have that in Buddhism, which is true. So therefore it can't be a religion. You could argue with that, produce various reasons why maybe a belief in a creator God isn't the be-all and end-all of what constitutes religion. But in some ways, although it didn't go through and they decided in the end Buddhism was a religion after all and could be taught in schools, as we know, they did have a point, actually. Well, it seems strange that I would perhaps say that, because it sounds like I'm trying to debar Buddhism from something. But the point is that they're right. Buddhism doesn't teach that there is a creator. And it doesn't teach that there is a personal saviour. It teaches something which is which you could hardly call a teaching in some ways, more like a drawing attention to rather than teaching. It's not, Buddhism is also different because they could have said this, but I don't know whether they did. Buddhism is not a set of beliefs. Buddhism is described as it is to do with awareness and drawing your attention to certain facts about the nature of things and about the nature of your experience. And it's just doing that, actually. It's drawing or pointing you to the fact that if the things that are being said or the things that are being pointed out have some meaning to you, then you should feel some commitment to that meaning and want to carry that through. If you like, if you're a real human being, in the sense a real human being defined as someone who is a searcher for truth, genuineness. And the things that are pointed out are very simple. One of the things that's pointed out is simply this, that the experience you have of the world, of yourself, of others, what you experience through what you smell, taste, touch, feel, how you think about the things that you sense, the whole mass of what constitutes for us personal experience, that's the only thing you have. If you want to work with something, if you want to work with the world, you have to do it through your experience. There's nothing else you can use than that. If you think, well, there's some rather high-flown message there might be somewhere which says I should do this, I should think like that, and so forth, which is kind of different. Actually, the only way such an apparent high message could come is actually through your direct experience. At least through your experience of your ideas, concepts, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. And all that is still within the sphere of experience. So no matter how high-flown your ideas might be, how grand they might seem, how they might introduce things like a creator God, a God that punishes, a God that lifts you up to heaven, some kind of agent, if you want to call him that, of God that does the actual punishment. From perhaps a Christian viewpoint, you might think that. Other religions would have different viewpoints. But all those, when it comes down to it, are simply things that arise in one's mind. There's nothing else than that. Because there's nothing exterior to the sphere of your experience. Now, it might be, if you think like that, that's the first thing to be drawn attention to, which is actually, blindingly obvious. And I say blindingly because it might be true. It's like we don't draw a message from that. We just take it for granted. And take it for granted that certain messages that it seems to send to us, like a naive belief in an external world. I say naive because there could be subtleties involved with that, but at least the naive one. That's kind of sold to us by the way we think and the way we experience things. Now, it might be you think, well, this is my personal experience. Maybe that makes everything ego-centered. Because after all, it's my personal experience. This is where things get a little more subtle, but are still very direct, in fact. And that is, you need to look at what you mean by ego, by self. And I don't mean looking at it in some theoretical or philosophical kind of way, but what it is in your experience to think of ego, to think of self, and so forth. Because that's an actual experience. We know when our ego is being attacked. It might be something trivial, like having your toe trodden on, and you react to that. And you can see somehow that's what comes from your ego. And you think, well, it's quite a low-level way of relating. But it could be quite greater than that. In a sense, you might have a feeling of your position in the world being such and such. It doesn't have to be position in the world as like a great person, a great political figure, or a great member of the aristocracy or something like that. But it could be just, I've been a socialist all my life. Or a conservative all my life. Not biased here to one or the other. But it's still the idea, this is me, this is what I am somehow. And it could be more complicated than that. It could be something to do with my family. Again, it doesn't have to be, an aristocratic family or something, but just ideals or notions of my family. All these things get built around the construction of egocentricity. And from a Buddhist perspective, it's thought that that ego that seems to permeate everything we do and is the root of everything we do, and we think in essence doesn't change, turns out when you look carefully it's as dynamic and changing as everything else one encounters. So the idea of a fixed sense of self is something that collapses simply under inspection, clear inspection of your own experience. If you enter into this experience strongly enough, and this is where the techniques of meditation begin to come in, because they are methods of using one's mind so as to empower it to perceive more clearly. It's as though through the methods of meditation, one's mind becomes like a lens that enables very strong focusing to occur. And you begin to see things that you thought were there, and then suddenly you begin to see, oh, they're not really there at all, or they're not like what I thought they were. And the ego is certainly something like that. Most ideas we have about the ego are just plain wrong. And that's quite a shock. So meditation in Buddhism leads to shocking experience quite often. People become quite upset. Somebody said, mankind cannot take very much reality, and that's certainly very true from a Buddhist perspective. As you begin to see the realness of things, you find it difficult to take. But you can take it. You know, it's rather uncourageous to say, oh, you can't cope with it and it's impossible, so we better give up the journey somehow. It's a journey of discovery, a journey of truth. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. But one of the core things that you see is the emptiness of the sense of self. People feel that if you realize the self to be empty, somehow that would be a very terrible thing. One wouldn't know where to go from there. It's as though the powerhouse of one's being would somehow be undermined. But that's really just the public relations exercise of the ego. It doesn't actually, it's not actually the case that to undermine the ego means you undermine all the things that you value in your life, of love, of tenderness, basis of wisdom, energy focused towards some particular end. All these things are possible, in fact become stronger the less ego involvement there is. One of the things that is to be discovered is that this awareness which underlies the nature experience itself in terms of consciousness, awareness if you wish, but that is not possessed by anybody. It's not my possession. It's not yours. It's actually free of that. If you wanted to have an image for that, then think of the islands in the Pacific that seem totally perhaps separate from each other. Yet if you could drain away the ocean, you could see that they were the tops of mountains. You go round to some underlying bedrock. And that provides a kind of common basis, common ground for all the different mountains and all the different islands, which is simply that part of the mountain which is above the water. And so it is with our own personal experiences as individuals. The basic awareness, you might say, out of which we are, I put quotes around this, constructed, that's not owned by anybody. It acts as a kind of bedrock, an underlying basis for everyone's personal reality, but goes beyond the personal. Another way of looking at it is to think that it is like a great web of awareness or knowing that joins us all together. And we may indeed all be joined together in this way, but there is a sense, of course, in which we don't recognize that. So although that connectivity is there in that web of reality, you might say, there's also a sense of confusion associated with it, which prevents us seeing the obvious connections we all have with each other. We kind of recognize we are connected in some way, but not just how strong, just how deep that really is. Said because everybody is interconnected through this web-like nature, everyone is, at least in potential, open to everything that there is. Because there's no blind alleys in this connectivity. You can go from one place to another. There's always a pathway, as it were, that enables that to happen. And not just a pathway, but some kind of directness always from one person to another. And that's the open quality that exists. In Buddhism, we're always talking about learning to be open. And that's based on this quality of connectivity. The fact that that connectivity is there and describes many and various interrelationships is what is called the clarity aspect of things. It's as though the interconnection of things is the stuff or the staff of wisdom itself. Natural clarity that is present everywhere. And also that it is alive, because actually no part of this universe is dead. I said everything is connected in Buddhism to the idea of experience, and mentioned consciousness and awareness. This is the very stuff out of which everything is made. Even the apparently inert or inanimate physical universe is created out of this. There isn't time to go into how I might show that, but it's a very important idea. And that means that the aliveness, what you might call the sensitivity or the tender quality that exists in the natural aliveness of things means that the whole of the universe has a sensitive and responsive quality to it. Because every part, every person can go out equally to every other part. We say that there is no bias in the universe as it is, just naturally. Everything is unbiased. Everything has some equalness quality about it. Because there is no possibility of obstruction, of problem in that sense, then the underlying essence of the universal experience is one of joy. Now, you can't realize that until the confusion that seems to differentiate each one of us from the other, until that's lost or understood clearly, then that joyful nature of experience doesn't come through. Because there is confusion, and because the truth is that everything is open and clear, then compassion is a natural function of experience. Because the confusion that causes pain and suffering need not be there. In some sense, part of ego's game to have created it. Compassion is to break down those barriers, which aren't really barriers, not really there, but they seem to be there. And the loving nature of the universe is the natural tenderness that is experienced by, again, if there was no confusion. As you move from any one of that part of that web of reality to any other part of it, there's no obstruction. And the aliveness and the tenderness is experienced in terms of love, of the natural wishing for the joyfulness and happiness of all beings. That's my attempt to tell you about Buddhism in 5 minutes. There's a lot more to say than that, of course, but maybe it's helpful.